The corridors of Sanctuary Station hummed with the usual noise of 1,000 different species going about their business. Merchants haggled over prices, diplomats discussed treaties, and children played in the open gardens that connected the various sectors. It was supposed to be a place of peace, a neutral ground where all species of the Galactic Coalition could meet without fear. 8-year-old Minho didn't care much about diplomacy or trade. He was chasing his small robot pet through the station's market district, laughing as the little machine beeped and dodged between the legs of tall aliens. His parents had told him to stay in the human sector, but the robot had escaped, and Minho wasn't about to let his favorite toy get lost. The boy ran past a group of Keltharian traders, their blue skin shimmering under the station lights. They smiled at him as he passed. Everyone knew the human children on the station. They were always friendly, always curious, and always getting into harmless trouble. Minho turned a corner and found himself in a section of the station he didn't recognize. The walls here were darker and the air felt colder. Strange symbols marked the doorways. His robot had stopped moving and sat beeping softly near a large archway. The boy picked up his toy and turned to leave. That's when he bumped into something hard. Minho stumbled backward and looked up. A tall reptilian creature stood before him, covered in dark green scales and wearing elaborate robes. The creature held a golden cup that had spilled purple liquid all over its chest, the alien's yellow eyes fixed on the child with a look of pure hatred. "Clumsy mammal," the creature hissed in perfect English. "Do you know what you have done?" Minho's eyes went wide with fear. "I'm sorry." "I didn't mean to. I was just getting my toy and—" The creature's clawed hand moved faster than the boy could react. It struck Minho across the face with terrible force, sending the child flying backward into the metal wall. The boy's head cracked against the surface and he crumpled to the floor. Blood pooled beneath him. The alien, a Vralthic diplomat named Threndok, looked down at the unconscious child with disgust. "That is how we teach lessons to inferior species," he said to his companions, who had gathered to watch. Within seconds, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Security cameras had caught everything. Commander Taiyang was in his office reviewing supply reports when his communication device exploded with alerts. His face went pale as he watched the security footage. Without a word, he sprinted from his office, his hand already on his weapon. He reached the scene in less than 2 minutes. Medical teams were already there, carefully lifting the small broken body onto a stretcher. Minho's face was swollen and covered in blood. His arm bent at an unnatural angle. The Vralthic diplomat stood nearby, calmly cleaning his claws. 3 more Vralthic guards had formed a protective circle around him. "You are under arrest," Taiyang said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Threndok looked at the human commander with amusement. "I have diplomatic immunity. The child disrespected me. I responded appropriately according to Vralthic law. This is a coalition station. You assaulted a child. I disciplined an inferior who damaged my ceremonial garment. If your species cannot control its offspring, perhaps you should keep them in cages." The Vralthic's lipless mouth curved into something like a smile. "Now step aside, human. Your kind has no authority over the Vralthic dominion." Taiyang's hand tightened on his weapon, but he knew the law. Diplomatic immunity was absolute on neutral stations. If he acted now, it could start an incident between species. He stepped aside, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. The Vralthic walked away, laughing with his companions. In the medical bay, Dr. Yunji screamed when she saw her son. She was a civilian engineer, not prepared for the sight of Minho's shattered skull and broken bones. Her husband Dongwu held her as the doctors worked frantically to save the boy's life. Fractured skull, broken arm, severe concussion, internal bleeding. The head doctor listed the injuries in a quiet voice. "We're doing everything we can." News of the attack spread through the human community on the station within minutes. Within an hour, every human colony in the sector knew what had happened. Within 3 hours, Earth itself had received the full security footage. Ambassador Jiwan tried to handle it through proper diplomatic channels. She filed formal protests with the Galactic Coalition. She demanded that the Vralthic government hand over Threndok for trial under coalition law. She spoke with calm professionalism even though her hands shook with anger. The Vralthic response came 12 hours later. High Commander Vrexthal, leader of the Vralthic fleet stationed near the sector, broadcast a message to Sanctuary Station. The Vralthic Dominion does not apologize to lesser species. The human child showed disrespect and was punished according to our laws. If humans cannot accept their place in the natural order, perhaps they do not belong in this sector of space. The family of the child will issue a formal apology to diplomat Threndok, or the Vralthic fleet will consider it an act of hostility. Jiwan watched the message with disbelief. She had been a diplomat for 20 years and had never seen such arrogance. She immediately sent a message to Earth to the Coalition Council, to every human colony. They're demanding we apologize, she told Taeyang later that day. They actually think we'll apologize for their crime. Taeyang stood at the window of the medical bay watching young Minho fight for his life. Machines beeped steadily, keeping the boy alive. What does Earth say? Nothing yet. Radio silence. All military channels have gone dark. Jiwan paused. Taeyang, I've never seen Earth go this quiet. What does it mean? The commander turned to her and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Fear, but not fear of the Vralthic. It means, Taeyang said softly, that humanity is making a decision, and I don't think the Vralthic understand what they've done. On Earth, in the command center of the combined fleet, Admiral Sunwoo stood before a massive display showing the location of every human military vessel in known space. He was 70 years old, gray-haired, and had retired 5 years ago after the last corporate war. He had hoped never to command a fleet again, but he had watched the footage of little Minho being struck down. He had heard the Vralthic demand for an apology, and he had read the reports about how the Vralthic were now positioning their fleet aggressively around Sanctuary Station, firing warning shots at human civilian ships. One of those warning shots had hit a transport vessel. 3 humans were dead. 20 more were injured. The Admiral looked at his officers, men and women who had fought in humanity's bloodiest conflicts. They looked back at him with the same expression, the same terrible understanding. How long to mobilize the full fleet? Sunwoo asked. 70% can be ready in 6 hours, sir. Full deployment in 24 hours. Do it. Send the order to every human military vessel in space. Destination, Virtus Prime Sanctuary Station. Maximum speed. Sir, one of the younger officers asked. The Galactic Coalition will demand we pursue diplomatic solutions first. There are protocols. Protocols. Sunwoo turned to face the young man. They attacked a child. They killed civilians. They're making threats because they think we're weak. They think we're prey. The Admiral's voice dropped to something cold and final. We're about to teach them what humans really are. Send the message. Within the hour, 217 human warships began moving through space, all headed toward the same destination. They moved with a speed and coordination that made Coalition observers nervous. On Sanctuary Station, Minho remained in a coma. His mother sat beside his bed, holding his small hand. She had refused to apologize. She would never apologize. Outside the station, the Vralthic fleet took up aggressive positions. High Commander Vrexthal was confident. Humans were traitors and diplomats, soft creatures who avoided conflict. They would back down. They always did. He didn't know that humanity had just declared war. He didn't know that the storm was coming. And by the time he realized his mistake, it would be far too late. The message reached every human settlement in the galaxy within 18 hours. On distant mining colonies and scientific research stations, aboard trading vessels crossing between stars, humans stopped what they were doing and watched the same footage. A small boy being struck down. His blood on the station floor. The Vralthic laughing. Lieutenant Borum sat in her quarters on the orbital defense platform above Earth, watching the video for the 5th time. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk so hard her knuckles turned white. She had a nephew about Minho's age. The thought of anyone hurting Junho made her stomach twist with rage. Her communication panel blinked. New orders, all personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill. Full combat readiness in 30 minutes. Borum had been in the military for 8 years. She had never seen these particular orders before. They were the kind of orders that only came during wartime. Earth had not been at war with an alien species in 73 years. She grabbed her uniform and ran. Across human space, the same scene repeated itself thousands of times. Reservists were called up. Civilian ships were commandeered for military transport. Factories that hadn't produced weapons in decades suddenly roared back to life. Humanity was preparing for something the galaxy had never seen. In the diplomatic quarter of the Coalition's central station, Ambassador Yanwu received an urgent message from the Keltharian Republic. The Keltharians were one of humanity's oldest allies, peaceful traders who had been part of the coalition for over 2,000 years. "You need to recall your fleet," the Keltharian ambassador said, his blue face showing genuine concern. "The Vralthik have a powerful military. If this escalates, they attacked a child," Yanwu interrupted, her voice flat. "They killed civilians. They threatened us. What would your people do?" The Keltharian was quiet for a moment. "We would pursue diplomatic solutions. Violence only creates more violence. Then you've never been pushed far enough." Yanwu ended the transmission. Other coalition species were having similar conversations with human representatives. Everyone was worried. The humans were mobilizing their entire military force over one incident. It seemed like an overreaction. It seemed dangerous. None of them understood. They had never studied human history carefully enough. Captain Deho commanded a large merchant vessel called the Bright Horizon. He had been trading with alien species for 20 years, carrying goods between human colonies and coalition worlds. He was not a military man. He had never fired a weapon in his life, but when he received the recall order, he immediately changed course and headed for the nearest human military station. His ship would be loaded with supplies and ammunition. He would do his part. On the journey, Daiho accessed the human historical database. He had heard stories about Earth's past but had never really paid attention. Now he read everything he could find: the 100 Years' War, World War I, World War II, the corporate conflicts of the 22nd century. Humanity had been fighting wars for its entire recorded history. Thousands of years of conflict, of developing better weapons, better tactics, better ways to kill. And then they had gone to space and stopped. They had joined the coalition and become peaceful traders and diplomats. Everyone assumed that was humanity's true nature. Deho realized the terrible truth. Humanity hadn't changed. They had simply found no reason to fight. Until now. On Sanctuary Station, Commander Taeyang walked through the human sector and saw the change in his people. The civilians who normally went about their daily routines with smiles now moved with purpose. Engineers were reinforcing defensive positions. Medical staff were preparing for casualties. Even the children seemed quieter, more serious. Dr. Yunji had not left her son's side in 3 days. Minyo remained unconscious, his small body covered in bandages and connected to machines. The doctors said he would survive, but they weren't sure if there would be permanent damage. Taeyang found Yunji in the medical bay, staring at her son. "Dr. Yunji," he said quietly, "the Vralthik are still demanding that you apologize. If you do, this might end peacefully." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "Will it bring back those 3 people their warning shot killed? Will it erase what they did to my son? No. Then I will never apologize. Not to them. Not to anyone." She looked back at Minho. "Let them come. Let them try," Taeyang nodded. He hadn't expected any other answer. Outside the station, the Vralthik fleet had grown to 50 warships. High Commander Vrexthal was making a show of force, certain it would make the humans back down. His ships fired more warning shots near human vessels. They blocked trade routes. They sent threatening messages. The human fleet had not yet arrived, and Vrexthal took this as a sign of weakness. "They are afraid," he told his officers in the command center of his flagship. "They know they cannot match Vralthik power. Soon they will crawl to us and beg forgiveness." Warcast Threndok, the Vralthik who had struck Minho, stood nearby. Humans are prey animals, soft, emotional. They lack the warrior spirit. "This will be over within days." Vrexthal nodded in agreement. The Vralthik had conquered 17 different species over the past 2 centuries. They knew how to identify weakness. Humans showed all the signs. They were wrong. The first human ship arrived at Virtus Prime exactly 72 hours after the attack. It was a destroyer-class vessel called the Retribution, commanded by Major Suhyun. The ship took up a position between Sanctuary Station and the Vralthik fleet, 1 ship against 50. Vrexthal laughed when he saw it. "They send 1 ship? This is their response?" Then the 2nd ship arrived, and the 3rd, and the 4th. Within 6 hours, 20 human warships had positioned themselves in a defensive formation around Sanctuary Station. They said nothing. They made no threats. They simply waited. Admiral Sunwoo arrived on the command carrier Indomitable 12 hours later. The ship was massive, one of humanity's largest military vessels. It had been built after the last corporate war and had never been used in actual combat. Captain Hunsik commanded the Indomitable's tactical operations. He was a veteran of the corporate wars, a man who had seen the worst of human conflict. When he took his position on the bridge, he felt the familiar cold focus of combat readiness settling over him. "Scan the Vralthic fleet," Sun Wu ordered. "I want to know the exact position and capability of every ship." The scans completed in minutes. The Vralthic ships were powerful, no question. They had strong weapons and thick armor, but they were designed for intimidation and quick strikes against weaker opponents. Sun Wu studied the data and smiled. It was not a kind smile. He opened a direct communication channel to the Vralthic flagship. "High Commander Vrexthal, this is Admiral Sun Wu of the Human Combined Fleet. You have 12 hours to surrender all individuals involved in the attack on the human child and the killing of human civilians. You will also withdraw your fleet from this sector. This is your only warning." The communication center on the Indomitable went silent. Everyone waited for the response. It came 5 minutes later. Vrexthal appeared on the screen, his reptilian face showing amusement. "Admiral, you are outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Your ships are small. Your species has no experience with real warfare. I suggest you withdraw before we are forced to destroy you." 12 hours, Sun Wu repeated. "After that, we will consider you hostile and act accordingly. You dare threaten the Vralthic Dominion? We who have conquered worlds while your species was still climbing trees." Vrexthal's voice rose in anger. "You are prey. We are predators. Know your place." Sun Wu leaned forward slightly. 12 hours. I suggest you use that time to review human history. Study our wars. Study what we're capable of. Then make your choice. He ended the transmission. On the Vralthic flagship, Vrexthal ordered his officers to prepare for battle. "These humans are fools. We will crush them and teach the galaxy that the Vralthic are not to be challenged." One junior officer, a female named Vrenix, quietly accessed the human historical database. What she read made her blood run cold. She tried to tell her commander, but he dismissed her concerns. "History means nothing. We face them now and they are weak." Vrenix said nothing more, but she began making personal preparations. She had a feeling her fleet was about to learn a terrible lesson. The 12 hours passed slowly. The human fleet maintained its position, silent and waiting. More ships arrived every hour, until there were over 50 human vessels in formation. On Sanctuary Station, people watched through the windows as the two fleets faced each other in the darkness of space. Parents held their children. Merchants stopped their trading. Everyone waited. In the medical bay, Minho's eyes opened for the first time in 4 days. "Mom," he whispered. Yunji sobbed with relief and held her son's hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. My head hurts. I know. It's going to be okay." Outside, Admiral Sun Wu looked at the countdown timer. 3 minutes remained. "All ships," he said calmly. "Weapons free. Execute Protocol Omega." Captain Hyunsik felt his heart rate increase. Protocol Omega. Total warfare. No mercy, no surrender. Complete destruction of the enemy. The countdown reached 0. The Vralthic fleet fired first. The Vralthic missiles screamed through space toward the human fleet. 40 Vralthic warships had launched their opening attack, expecting to overwhelm the smaller human vessels with pure firepower. High Commander Vrexthal watched from his flagship's command center. Confident in his victory, the missiles never reached their targets. Point defense systems on every human ship activated simultaneously, filling space with streams of projectiles that intercepted the incoming fire. Explosions lit up the darkness like fireworks, but not a single missile got through. "Impossible," Vrexthal muttered. "Fire again! All batteries!" The second wave launched. This time, the Vralthic ships added energy weapons to the attack, hoping to overwhelm the human defenses. Surely they couldn't stop everything. They were wrong again. On the Indomitable, Captain Hyunsik watched his tactical display with satisfaction. Adaptive shields holding at 97%. Point defense working perfectly. "They're not even scratching us," Admiral Sun Wu nodded. "Return fire. Target their command vessels first." What happened next shocked every observer watching the battle. The human ships didn't fire massive energy beams or launch waves of missiles. Instead, they accelerated forward at incredible speed, moving faster than the Vralthic thought possible. The human vessels split into groups of 3 and 4, surrounding individual Vralthic ships. Commander Wanshik led one such group aboard the destroyer Swift Justice. His 3 ships moved around a Vralthic cruiser in perfect coordination, like wolves circling prey. They fired from multiple angles simultaneously, their weapons designed not for raw power but for precision. The Vralthic cruiser's shields collapsed within seconds. Its armor, thick and designed to withstand heavy bombardment, meant nothing against the focused human fire. The ship exploded, taking its entire crew with it. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated itself 20 times. The Vralthic fleet suddenly found itself fighting an enemy that didn't follow any rules they understood. They're not fighting like a fleet, Warcast Threndok shouted in the Vralthic command center. They're fighting like individual hunters. He was right. Human military doctrine, developed over thousands of years of warfare, emphasized flexibility and initiative. Each captain made their own decisions, adapted to the situation, and worked together without needing constant orders from above. The Vralthic, by contrast, waited for commands from their leaders. When those commands came too slowly, they hesitated. And in space combat, hesitation meant death. Lieutenant Hanna commanded the weapon systems on the Indomitable. She had spent the last 4 days studying the Vralthic fleet composition, learning their tactics, identifying weaknesses. Now she put that knowledge to use. Target their command frequencies, she told her team. Jam their communications. Within minutes, the Vralthic ships found themselves unable to coordinate effectively. Individual captains tried to make decisions, but they had been trained to follow orders, not think independently. Chaos spread through their formation. Meanwhile, human ships coordinated perfectly through encrypted channels that changed frequency every few seconds. The Vralthic couldn't jam what they couldn't predict. High Commander Vrexthal finally understood he was in serious trouble. All ships fall back to defensive positions. Regroup! But falling back required coordination. And without clear communications, the Vralthic retreat turned into a confused mess. Ships collided with each other trying to turn. Formations broke apart. Panic spread. The human fleet pressed their advantage without mercy. Young pilot Tae-hyun flew his fighter through the chaos, his cameras recording everything. He had volunteered for this mission specifically because of what happened to Minho. Tae-hyun had a little sister about that age. The thought of anyone hurting her made him see red. His fighter dodged Vralthic fire easily. The alien weapons were designed to hit large, slow-moving targets. A small, fast human fighter was almost impossible for them to track. Tae-hyun launched precision missiles at the Vralthic ship's sensor arrays, blinding them one by one. "This is for the kid," he whispered as another missile found its target. On the Vralthic flagship, Warcast Threndok was trying to restore order when a junior officer ran to him in panic. "Sir, we've lost contact with 17 ships. Our fleet is breaking apart." "That's impossible. We outnumbered them. The humans, they fight like nothing we've ever seen. They're everywhere at once. They know exactly where to hit us. It's like they've been studying us for—" The ship shuddered from an impact. Alarms blared. "Direct hit to our main reactor." "Shields failing!" Threndok looked at the tactical display in horror. In less than 3 hours, the Vralthic fleet had been reduced from 50 ships to 33. And the humans hadn't lost a single vessel. He finally pulled up the human historical database that Junior Officer Vrenix had tried to show him earlier. What he read made him understand his mistake. Humans had been fighting wars for 10,000 years. They had fought with sticks and stones, with swords and spears, with guns and bombs, with nuclear weapons and biological warfare. They had nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times. They had developed the concept of total war, where every resource, every person, every strategy was used to achieve complete victory. And then they had gone to space and stopped fighting. The galaxy thought they had become peaceful. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. Humans had simply run out of enemies. Until now. Specialist Yuna worked in the electronic warfare section of the Indomitable. She was a quiet woman who had spent her entire military career studying alien computer systems. Now she put that knowledge to devastating use. She hacked into the Vralthic communications network and began broadcasting audio across all their channels. The sounds of their dying warriors, their ships exploding, their commanders screaming in panic. She made sure every Vralthic soldier heard what was happening to their fleet. It was psychological warfare, and it was brutally effective. Already shaken by their losses, many Vralthic crews began to panic. Some tried to surrender. Others tried to flee. The human fleet gave them no chance to do either. Admiral Sunwoo watched the battle with cold efficiency. He felt no joy in the killing, but he felt no hesitation either. The Vralthic had attacked a child. They had killed civilians. They had threatened humanity. This was justice. "Sir," Captain Hyunsik said quietly, "the Vralthic are breaking. Should we accept surrenders?" Did they accept Minho's surrender when he apologized? Did they show mercy to those civilians on the transport ship? Sunwoo's voice was ice. "Continue the attack. Total destruction of all military assets." Around the galaxy, other species watched the battle through long-range sensors and felt a chill run through them. The peaceful humans, the friendly traders, the diplomatic species that always sought compromise. They were destroying the Vralthic fleet with terrifying efficiency. On the Keltharian homeworld, Elder Counselor Thexmore watched the tactical data with growing horror. "By the ancestors," he whispered. "They've been holding back this entire time. They could have conquered half the galaxy." His aide looked at him with confusion. "Why didn't they?" "Because they didn't want to. They chose peace." Thexmore pointed at the screen showing the battle. "But someone hurt their child. Someone chose to make them angry. And now we're seeing what humans really are." The Coalition had records of every major species' military capabilities. They thought they understood humanity's strength. But those assessments had been made based on peacetime operations, on defensive military exercises, on the small conflicts that humanity had engaged in since joining the Coalition. No one had ever pushed humanity to total war. Until now, the battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, only 12 Vralthic ships remained functional, and most of those were heavily damaged. The human fleet had lost 0 ships. 3 had taken minor damage. 47 casualties total, mostly minor injuries. The Vralthic had lost over 12,000 warriors. High Commander Vrexthal stared at his command screen in shock. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Vralthic Dominion, had been crushed like insects. The humans hadn't just defeated them, they had humiliated them. "Admiral Sunwoo," he said through the communication channel, his voice shaking. We surrender. Please, no more. We surrender." Sunwoo's face appeared on the screen, and Vrexthal saw something in the human's eyes that made him truly afraid for the first time in his life. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was cold, calculated determination. "You attacked a child," Sunwoo said quietly. "You killed civilians. You threatened my species. And you thought we would surrender to you." He leaned forward. "We don't accept your surrender, Commander. We don't want your apology. We want justice." What does that mean?" "It means we're not done. Your fleet here was just the beginning. We're going to follow you back to your territory. We're going to dismantle your entire military. And we're going to make sure the Vralthic Dominion never threatens anyone again." The screen went dark. On Sanctuary Station, Minho was sitting up in his hospital bed, eating soup his mother had brought him. He could hear the cheering from the human sector as news of the victory spread. He didn't really understand what was happening. The human fleet didn't stop at Virtus Prime. Within hours of crushing the Vralthic force near Sanctuary Station, Admiral Sunwoo gave the order that would change galactic history. "Pursue them, all the way to their homeworld if necessary." Captain Hyunsik looked at his commander with surprise. "Sir, the Galactic Coalition will demand we cease hostilities. There are protocols for—" "The Vralthic chose to ignore those protocols when they attacked our child," Sunwoo interrupted. "They ignored them when they killed our civilians. They ignored them when they threatened us. Now we'll show them what happens when humanity stops following protocols." The order went out to the entire human fleet. Over 200 warships began moving deeper into Vralthic space, following the 12 surviving enemy vessels as they fled toward their territory. The Galactic Coalition reacted exactly as expected. Within 12 hours, Ambassador Jiwon received an urgent communication from the Coalition Central Council. "The humans must cease their military operations immediately," the council speaker declared. "You have defended yourselves successfully. Now you must pursue diplomatic solutions." Jiwon looked at the council speaker with cold eyes. "The Vralthic demanded we apologize after they nearly killed a child. They threatened us when we refused. They killed our civilians, and now you want us to stop pursuing justice? Violence only breeds more violence. The Coalition exists to protect its members. You failed to protect us. You failed to hold the Vralthic accountable. So we will do it ourselves." Jiwon ended the transmission without waiting for a response. Across human space, the reaction to the fleet's pursuit was unanimous support. Reservists continued to volunteer. Supply ships raced to meet the fleet with ammunition and provisions. Every human colony sent messages of support. On Earth, news broadcasts showed the battle footage continuously. Reporter Park Ji-ho became famous for her coverage, her voice filled with cold determination as she described each human victory. "This is what happens," she told her viewers, "when someone hurts our children. This is what happens when someone threatens our families." The Vralthic thought we were weak. They were wrong. The human fleet entered Vralthic territory 3 days after the first battle. They encountered resistance immediately. The Vralthic had called for reinforcements, and 40 fresh warships awaited the humans at the border. This time, the Vralthic were prepared. They had studied the human tactics. They had set up defensive positions. They were ready. It didn't matter. Colonel Minjae led the ground assault forces aboard his carrier, but his expertise was in orbital warfare. All ships, formation Delta. They're trying to use the asteroid field for cover. Don't let them dictate the terms of engagement. The human fleet split into multiple groups, each one moving through the asteroid field with precision. The Vralthic had hoped the asteroids would limit human mobility, but human pilots were trained in close-quarters navigation. They had practiced in Earth's own asteroid belt for decades. Commander Heejin, leading a squadron of frigates, demonstrated this perfectly. Her ships wove between asteroids at high speed, using them for cover while her weapons targeted Vralthic vessels with surgical precision. Within an hour, she had destroyed 6 enemy ships without taking a single hit. The Vralthic tried to adapt, but adaptation required time and flexibility. The humans had been perfecting their tactics for thousands of years. The Vralthic military, based on rigid hierarchies and traditional strategies, couldn't keep up. Captain Donghyun commanded a stealth frigate called the Silent Hunter. His ship was equipped with advanced cloaking technology, making it nearly invisible to sensors. He used this advantage to devastating effect. The Silent Hunter would appear behind enemy vessels, disable their engines with precise shots, then disappear before the Vralthic could respond. Dongyun left a trail of crippled ships in his wake, forcing the Vralthic to divert resources to rescue their own crews. It was efficient. It was brutal. It was working. Warcast Threndok, the Vralthic who had struck young Minho, was aboard one of the defending ships. He watched his fleet crumble and finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. That moment of anger, that casual blow against a small child, had started a war his people could not win. "We have to surrender," he told his captain. "We have to end this before they destroy everything." His captain looked at him with hatred. "You started this, Threndok. You and your pride. Now thousands are dying because you couldn't control your temper." Before Threndok could respond, human missiles struck their ship. The vessel shuddered and began to break apart. The last thing Threndok saw was the cold darkness of space rushing in through the breached hull. Back in Coalition space, other species watched the unfolding war with growing alarm. The humans weren't just winning. They were dominating. Every engagement ended with Vralthic losses and minimal human casualties. Strategist Seojin had been assigned to brief Coalition observers about human military doctrine. He stood before a room full of alien diplomats and military advisors, explaining concepts they had never encountered. "Humans developed something called total war during our darkest periods," Seojun explained. "It means using every resource, every advantage, every strategy to achieve complete victory. No half measures, no compromises. Total commitment to destroying the enemy's ability to fight." A Keltharian diplomat raised his hand. "But surely there are limits. Rules of engagement. Humanitarian concerns? Of course. We don't target civilians. We don't use weapons of mass destruction unless absolutely necessary. We follow the laws of war." Seojin paused. "But within those rules we are ruthless. We have to be. Because in total war, losing means extinction." Another diplomat, this one from the Peaceful Trellis Collective, spoke up nervously. "How did your species survive being so violent?" Seojin smiled sadly. "We almost didn't. We came close to destroying ourselves multiple times. But we learned, we grew. We chose peace." His smile disappeared. "But we never forgot how to fight. We couldn't afford to." Dr. Chewin, a human anthropologist, added her own perspective to these briefings. "Other species have warrior castes, specific groups bred and trained for combat. Humans don't work that way. Every human is taught the capacity for violence. Every human learns to fight, even if they never use those skills. It's part of our survival instinct. The coalition observers began to understand why humanity had seemed so peaceful for 73 years. They hadn't changed. They had simply chosen not to fight, and that choice made their current actions even more terrifying, because it meant they were choosing to fight, now deliberately, with full knowledge of what they were capable of. The human fleet pushed deeper into Vralthic space, destroying military installations and disabling defensive platforms. Admiral Sunwoo made it clear, any Vralthic military asset was a legitimate target. Civilian populations were protected, but the Vralthic military would be completely dismantled. High Commander Vrexthal, who had fled after the first battle, tried desperately to organize a defense of the Vralthic homeworld. He called in every available ship, every reserve force, every ally the Vralthic had in the galaxy. Few answered his call. The other species who had fought alongside the Vralthic in the past now stayed neutral. They had seen what humanity could do. They wanted no part of it. On Sanctuary Station, young Minho was finally well enough to leave the medical bay. His head still hurt and his arm was in a cast, but he was alive and recovering. Nurse Ariam checked on him regularly, amazed at his resilience. "You're a strong boy," she told him one day. Minho didn't feel strong. He felt scared and confused. "Miss Ariam, why did that alien hurt me?" I said I was sorry. The nurse knelt down to his level. "Because some people are cruel, Minho. Some people think they can hurt others without consequences. But they were wrong. Because of what the ships are doing? Yes, sweetheart. Because humanity protects its children, always." Minho thought about this. Are a lot of people dying? Ariam hesitated. The truth was yes. Thousands of Vralthic warriors had died. But how do you explain that to an 8-year-old? Bad people are being stopped from hurting others. That's all you need to know. Dr. Yunji recorded a message that was broadcast across all human channels. She stood in the medical bay with her son beside her, his bandaged head visible to everyone watching. "This is my son, Minho. He's 8 years old. He likes robots and playing with his friends. He's a good boy who says please and thank you. And someone nearly killed him because he accidentally bumped into them." Her voice shook with emotion. "The Vralthic demanded that I apologize, that I should be sorry for their crime. I refused, and I will always refuse. Because my son did nothing wrong, because no child deserves to be hurt, because we are human and we protect our own." The message went viral across human space. It became a rallying cry. Millions of people shared it, added their own messages of support, told their own stories of protecting those they loved. The galaxy watched and realized something important. Humans weren't fighting for territory. They weren't fighting for resources or power. They were fighting for a single child, for the principle that hurting the innocent would have consequences, and that made them more dangerous than any species motivated by greed or conquest. Because principles don't compromise, principles don't negotiate, principles only demand justice. The terms of Vralthic surrender were absolute and non-negotiable. Admiral Sunwoo transmitted them to High Commander Vrexthal and the entire Vralthic government, making sure every species in the Galactic Coalition could hear them as well. The Vralthic Dominion will dismantle 90% of its military fleet. All remaining vessels will be used for defense only and subject to Coalition inspection. Every individual involved in the attack on the human child and the killing of human civilians will be surrendered for trial under Coalition law. The Vralthic will pay reparations to the families affected. And finally, the Vralthic will accept permanent monitoring by Coalition peacekeepers. High Commander Vrexthal listened to these demands and felt his world crumbling. The Vralthic Dominion had been a major power in the galaxy for centuries. Now they were being reduced to a minor species with no real military strength. But he had watched his fleets be destroyed. He had seen human tactics and capabilities. He knew there was no choice. "We accept your terms," he said, the words bitter on his tongue. Within hours, Vralthic ships began powering down their weapons and forming orderly lines for inspection. Human forces, supported by Coalition peacekeepers, began the process of dismantling the Vralthic military machine. The trials began 3 weeks later on the Coalition Central Station. Prosecutor Jihoon presented the evidence with calm precision: security footage of the attack, medical records showing Minho's injuries, testimony from witnesses, records of the Vralthic threats and their killing of civilians. The Vralthic defendants had no defense. Everything was documented. Everything was clear. Judge Hyewan, a respected human jurist, presided over the trials. Despite calls from some humans for immediate execution, she ensured that proper legal procedures were followed. "We are not barbarians," she told the court. "We will show the galaxy that humanity believes in justice, not revenge." The Vralthic who had directly attacked Minho were no longer alive to stand trial. Warcass Threndok had died in the battle, but those who had supported him, who had threatened humanity, who had ordered attacks on civilians, they all faced judgment. High Commander Vrexthal received a life sentence in a coalition prison. Other Vralthic military leaders received similar sentences. The message was clear. Attacking the innocent had consequences. The galaxy's perception of humanity changed overnight. Species that had viewed humans as soft traitors now gave them wide berth. Pirates who had occasionally targeted human vessels stopped entirely. No one wanted to risk provoking humanity's wrath. Captain Jamin commanded a merchant vessel that had been attacked by pirates twice before the war. Now he traveled the same routes without incident. Other captains reported the same experience. The space lanes were suddenly much safer for humans. "It's not right," Jamin told his crew one day. "We shouldn't be safer just because people are afraid of us." His first officer, a woman named Suman, disagreed. "Maybe it is right. Maybe the galaxy needed to know that there are consequences for violence, that the strong can't just prey on the weak." Jamin thought about Minho, about that small boy who had nearly died for accidentally bumping into someone. Maybe you're right. Trade negotiations suddenly favored human merchants. Other species offered better prices, better terms, better deals. They wanted humanity's goodwill. They wanted to stay on humanity's good side. Ambassador Yanwu found herself overwhelmed with requests from other species wanting to establish closer ties with humanity. Species that had ignored human diplomatic overtures for decades now sought alliances and partnerships. "They're afraid of us," she told Ambassador Jiwan during a private conversation. "Is that so bad?" Jiwan asked. "For 73 years, we've been patient. We've been peaceful. We've let others dismiss us. Maybe it's time they learn to respect us. Respect born from fear isn't real respect." "No," Jiwan agreed, "but it's a start. We'll earn their real respect through our actions. We'll show them that we're not monsters, that we fight only when necessary, that we protect the innocent." The Vralthic Dominion underwent massive changes. A reformer named Vral then, who had opposed the attack on Minho from the beginning, took leadership of the transitional government. He worked with coalition observers to rebuild Vralthic society along more peaceful lines. Commander Taeyang was assigned to oversee security during this transition. He walked through Vralthic cities and saw the change in how they looked at humans. The arrogance was gone. So was the dismissive contempt. Now there was wariness, respect, and in some cases genuine remorse. "Your species will recover," Taeyang told Vral then one day. "This doesn't have to be the end of the Vralthic people. It can be a new beginning." Vral then looked at the human commander with sad eyes. "We were taught that strength meant dominating others. That mercy was weakness. Your species showed us how wrong we were, how much that belief cost us." The human military began training coalition forces in their tactics and strategies. It was controversial at first. Many species worried about humanity teaching others how to wage war so effectively. But Commander Inhai, who led the training programs, had a different perspective. "We're not teaching them to be aggressive. We're teaching them to defend themselves, to protect the innocent. That's what our tactics are really about." She was right. The training focused on defensive operations, quick response to threats, and protecting civilian populations. The goal wasn't to create more warriors. It was to make the galaxy safer. On Sanctuary Station, life slowly returned to normal. The damage from the brief Vralthic occupation was repaired. Trade resumed. Families continued their daily routines. But there was one permanent change. A memorial was erected in the center of the station, listing the names of those who had died in the conflict. At the top was the name of young Minho, who had survived but whose attack had started everything. 5 years passed. Minho was now 13 years old. The scars on his head had faded, though they were still visible if you looked closely. His arm had healed completely. He was a normal teenager, interested in engineering like his parents, making friends, living his life. But everyone in the galaxy knew his name. He was the child whose attack had changed everything. The memorial service was held on the anniversary of the incident. Representatives from dozens of species attended, including several Vralthic. Minho stood beside his mother and placed a wreath at the memorial, remembering those who had died. Ambassador Jiwon gave a speech to the assembled crowd. 5 years ago, something terrible happened here. A child was hurt, lives were lost, and humanity responded with overwhelming force. Some say we overreacted, some say we were too harsh, but I say we did exactly what was necessary. She paused, looking at the crowd. For 73 years we had been peaceful. We had shown the galaxy one side of humanity, but when our children were threatened, when our people were killed, we showed another side, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. The Vralthic learned a hard lesson, but it was a lesson that needed to be taught. That attacking the innocent has consequences. That threatening peaceful people can awaken something terrible. That humanity will go to any lengths to protect its own. Admiral Sunwoo stood in the crowd beside his granddaughter Soyeon, who was about Minho's age. He had retired again after the war, this time for good. But he came to the memorial every year, remembering the decision he had made. Captain Hyunsik commanded the honor guard for the ceremony. Human and alien soldiers stood together, a symbol of how the galaxy had changed. The Vralthic representatives bowed deeply when Minho passed, showing genuine respect and remorse. After the ceremony, Minho spoke briefly with reporters. He was still shy, still uncomfortable with all the attention, but he had learned to accept his role in history. "Do you hate the Vralthic?" one reporter asked. Minho thought about the question carefully. "No, I was scared of them for a long time. But now I just feel sad. Sad that so many people died because someone got angry at a kid. I wish it never happened. But I'm glad that other kids are safer now." The reporter pressed further. "Do you think humanity's response was justified?" "I don't know. I was 8. I just wanted to say sorry for bumping into someone." Minho looked at the memorial. "But my mom says that sometimes bad people only understand one language. And if that's true, then I guess someone had to speak it to them." Dr. Yunji put her hand on her son's shoulder, proud of his thoughtfulness. She had refused to apologize 5 years ago, and she still believed she made the right choice. Her son had done nothing wrong. Neither had those civilians who died. The Vralthic had needed to be stopped. Lieutenant Nari, who had been promoted several times since the war, now commanded a patrol vessel protecting civilian trade routes. She reported that recruitment for human defense forces had increased dramatically after the war. Young people wanted to serve. They wanted to protect others, but they also learned restraint. Dr. Sangwoo's research on human combat psychology became required reading in military academies. Not just how to fight, but when to fight, when to show mercy, when to pursue peace. "The goal," Sangwoo wrote in his most famous paper, "is not to make humans more violent. It's to make them more discriminating in their violence. To save it for when it's truly necessary. To make sure that when we fight, it's for the right reasons.